Captain Alan Carter stood on the bridge of the starship Eclipse, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His ship was one of the newer models in the Galactic Empire's fleet. Sleek and powerful, but even its advanced systems couldn't prepare him for what he was about to face. The orders had come through just hours ago, a distress signal from the outer rim of Imperial space. A massive armada, dozens of ships strong, had been wiped out without warning. What made it worse was that no one knew who or what was responsible. Empire prided itself on its vast archives. Every species, every weapon, every piece of technology ever encountered by humanity was documented there. But this attack came from something completely unknown. There were no records, no warnings, nothing. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Humanity had expanded across galaxies, conquering and colonizing planets, believing itself untouchable. Now, something out there had proven them wrong. Alan turned away from the viewport and glanced at his crew. They were tense, their faces pale with unease. Lieutenant Samantha Lane sat at the communications station, her fingers hovering over the controls as if afraid to touch them. Ensign David Ross manned the sensors, his eyes glued to the screen as though expecting the enemy to appear at any moment. Alan understood their fear. He felt it too, heavy in his chest, but he couldn't let it show. He was the captain. He faltered, so would they. Anything yet? Alan asked, his voice calm despite the storm brewing inside him. David shook his head. Nothing, sir. No debris, no energy signatures. Whatever hit that fleet, it's gone now. That doesn't make sense, Samantha muttered under her breath. How do you destroy an entire armada and then just vanish? Alan didn't have an answer. Instead, he walked over to the tactical display, where a holographic map of the area floated above the table. The red dots representing the lost fleet blinked ominously, scattered across a section of uncharted space. Beyond that lay only darkness, unexplored regions marked with question marks. The Empire hadn't bothered to send many expeditions this far out. Why would they? These parts of the galaxy were barren, lifeless, or so everyone thought. We need to find answers, Alan said firmly. Whatever did this is still out. Here, we're walking into a trap. But if we don't investigate, we'll never know what happened. Samantha looked up at him, her brow furrowed. Do you really think we can take on something that took out an entire fleet? I don't know, Alan admitted. But we're all that's left between it and Earth right now. We have to try. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Laura Bennett sat hunched over her desk in the dimly lit lab of the United Earths Research Institute. Her office was cluttered with papers, data pads, and half-empty coffee cups. She'd been working non-stop for days, trying to make sense of a strange set of readings intercepted by deep space probes. At first glance, the signals seemed random, chaotic even. But the more she studied them, the more she noticed patterns complex. Sequences that repeated themselves like some kind of code. Laura leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. She wasn't a military scientist or a politician. She was just a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms. Yet here she was, staring at data that could change everything humanity knew about the universe. The signals weren't mechanical, at least not entirely. They pulsed with rhythms that reminded her of biological processes, heartbeats, neural activity, even the way cells communicated with each other. But these patterns were enormous, far larger than anything she'd ever seen. She called her assistant, a young man named Kevin, into the room. Take a look at this, she said, pointing to the screen. What do you see? Kevin squinted at the graph. Looks like noise. It's not noise, Laura replied. It's alive. Or at least part of it is. I think we're looking at a living organism, but one unlike anything we've ever encountered. Kevin frowned. You mean like a giant space amoeba or something? Laura chuckled nervously. I wish this thing intelligent, maybe. Look at how the signals overlap and interact. It's almost like communication. Before Kevin could respond, the door burst open, and Director Marcus Hales stormed in. He was a tall, imposing figure with sharp features and an even sharper temper. Dr. Bennett, he barked, what's going on? I've been getting calls. From the Senate, demanding updates. I'm analyzing the data, Laura explained. There's something out there, something big. And it's not just a machine. It's alive. Hale crossed his arms. Alive? You're telling me a giant alien creature destroyed an entire fleet? No, Laura said slowly. I'm saying we don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it's not in our archives. And it's heading closer to inhabited space. Hole aside, running a hand through his graying hair. Great, just great. Well, keep working on it. The Empire needs answers and fast. As Hale left the room, Laura turned back to the screen.
Ash.
She couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important, something critical.
Ash.
Opened another file, cross-referencing the mysterious signals with reports of the destroyed fleet. That's when she saw it, a faint trace of energy matching the pattern she'd been studying. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Her heart raced. Kevin, she whispered, we need to get this to Captain Carter, right now. Back aboard the Eclipse, Alan was growing impatient. Hours had passed since they entered the debris field, and still there was no sign of the attacker. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional crackle of static over the comms. Then suddenly the lights flickered. What's happening? Alan demanded. I don't know, sir, David shouted from the sensor station. Something's interfering with our systems. It's everywhere. Ship shuddered violently, throwing several crew members off balance. Alarms blared and red warning lights flashed across the bridge. Samantha frantically tapped at her console. Trying to regain control of the communications array. We're losing power, she yelled. It's like something's draining us dry. Alan gripped the railing as the floor tilted beneath his feet. Get us out of here, he ordered. I can't, David cried. The engines are offline, then it appeared. A shadow darker than the void of space loomed outside the viewport, blotting out the stars. It was massive, impossibly so. Its edges shifting and writhing like smoke caught in a hurricane. The crew stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. It's alive, Samantha breathed. Before anyone could react, the shadow surged forward, enveloping the Eclipse. For a moment, everything went black. Then a low hum filled the air, resonating through the ship like a heartbeat. Lights began to flicker. Back on, and the hum grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't hostile, at least. Not yet. It was curious. Alan stepped forward, his mind racing. Samantha, he said quietly, can you broadcast a message? She hesitated. A message? To what? To whatever's out there, Alan replied. Let's see if we can talk to it before it decides to eat us. Samantha nodded and began typing furiously. Moments later, a simple greeting echoed into the void. We come in peace. The response came almost instantly, not in words, but in a cascade of colors and sounds that rippled through the ship. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and utterly alien. For the first time since entering the debris field, Alan allowed himself a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive. This, after all, the hum continued to fill the Eclipse, reverberating through every corridor and cabin. The crew stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Captain Alan Carter took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Whatever was outside their ship wasn't attacking, at least, not yet. Instead, it seemed to be waiting. Did you see that? Samantha Lane asked, her voice trembling as she pointed at the viewport. Outside, the shadowy form shifted again, its edges glowing faintly with pulsating light. It reminded Alan of an ocean creature, graceful yet otherworldly, but on a scale so vast it defied imagination. It's responding, David Ross murmured from the sensor station. Whatever we sent out there, it heard us. Alan turned to Samantha, keep broadcasting. Simple phrases only, no technical jargon. If this thing understands anything, it'll be basic concepts. Samantha nodded and began typing again. This time the message was even simpler. We are humans. Mean no harm. Soon as the transmission went out, the lights in the shadow brightened, and a series of rhythmic pulses echoed back into the ship. The sound was low and resonant, almost musical, and it seemed to carry a sense of curiosity rather than hostility. David leaned closer to his console, analyzing the incoming signals. Sir, these patterns, it's like it's trying to communicate. Too, but I can't decode it. It's not language. Something else. What do you mean, something else? Alan asked sharply. I mean, it's not words or symbols. It's more like emotions. Or maybe intentions. David pulled up a visual representation of the signal on the main screen. Waves of color flowed across the display, shifting between warm hues and cold ones. Some parts pulsed rapidly, while others moved slowly, almost lazily. Alan frowned. Emotions? You're saying this thing is talking to us through feelings? It's possible, David replied. Some species use nonverbal communication. Maybe this one does too. At that moment, the ship shuddered again, though not violently. It felt more like a nudge, as if the entity were testing them. Alan glanced around the bridge. His crew looked terrified, but also fascinated. They had never encountered anything like this before, and neither had anyone else in the Empire. This was uncharted territory. Back on Earth, Dr. Laura Bennett was working tirelessly in her lab. After sending her findings to the Eclipse, she couldn't sit still. Her mind raced with questions. What was this thing? Where did it come from? And most importantly, why had it attacked the fleet? She called Kevin back into her office. I need you to run another analysis, she said. Focus on the emotional components of the signals. If this thing communicates through feelings, we might be able to interpret its behavior based on those patterns. Kevin raised an eyebrow. You think it got scared when it saw the fleet? It's possible, Laura replied. Think about it. Imagine being alone for thousands of years, drifting through space. Then suddenly you're surrounded by ships armed to the teeth. Wouldn't you assume they were hostile? Kevin nodded thoughtfully. So it lashed out because it thought it was under attack. Exactly, Laura said. But now, it's interacting with the Eclipse. That means it's intelligent enough to recognize a difference between aggression and peace. As Kevin worked, Laura opened a secure channel to Admiral Gregory Hayes, the head of the Galactic Fleet. She explained her theory that the entity wasn't inherently evil, but had acted out of fear or misunderstanding. Hayes listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sighed. Even if you're right, Doctor, this changes nothing. The Senate wants answers, and they want them now. Until we know for sure this thing isn't a threat, we have to treat it as one. Laura clenched her fists in frustration. With all due respect, Admiral, treating it like a threat will only make things worse. If it attacked because it felt threatened, sending more ships could provoke it further. Hayes shook his head. We don't have time for diplomacy. Senator Klein is pushing for immediate action. He's convinced this thing is a weapon created by some rival faction. Whether he's right or wrong doesn't matter. The public is panicking, and we need to show strength. Laura knew arguing wouldn't help. Instead, she focused on finding a way to prove her theory. She sent another message to the Eclipse, including her latest analysis, and urging them to continue communicating with the entity. Every second counted. On board the Eclipse, tensions were rising. While the crew tried to decipher the alien signals, Lieutenant Robert Quinn paced nervously near the tactical station. Quinn was young, eager to prove himself, and deeply loyal to the Empire. To him, the idea of negotiating with an unknown force was ridiculous. In his mind, there was only one solution: destroy it. Captain Quinn said abruptly, stepping forward. Permission to speak freely. Alan nodded. Go ahead. We can't trust this thing, Quinn argued. It already wiped out an entire fleet. Who's to say it won't do the same to us once it figures out what we're doing? Why, we're trying to talk to it, Alan replied calmly. If it attacked out of fear, then showing hostility will only confirm its suspicions. But what if it's lying? Quinn shot back. What if it's just playing along until it finds a weakness? Alan fixed Quinn with a hard stare. Lieutenant, I understand your concerns, but unless you have a better plan, we're sticking to diplomacy. Is that clear? Quinn hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. Despite his outward compliance, Quinn's mind was racing. He didn't believe diplomacy would work. To him, the entity was a monster, plain and simple, and monsters couldn't be reasoned with. They had to be destroyed. Later that evening, while most of the crew rested, Quinn snuck into the communications room. Using a secure line, he transmitted the coordinates of the Eclipse S location to Admiral Hayes in his message. He emphasized the danger posed by the entity and urged the fleet to launch an attack immediately. He signed off without hesitation, knowing full well the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Terra, as it later revealed itself to be, continued to interact with the Eclipse. Through a combination of sounds, colors, and vibrations, it conveyed fragments of its history. Vera described itself as a guardian, being composed of billions of smaller organisms that work together as one collective consciousness. Its purpose was to maintain balance in its galaxy, protecting weaker species from predators. But over time, isolation had taken its toll. Without other beings to interact with, Vera had forgotten how to coexist peacefully. When it detected the Imperial fleet approaching, it assumed they were invaders and reacted instinctively. Now faced with the Eclipse, Vera was uncertain. These humans weren't behaving like the others. They weren't firing weapons or attempting to flee. Instead, they were reaching out, trying to connect. Samantha translated the latest exchange. Aloud for the crew, it says it doesn't want to fight, just wants to be left alone. Alan let out a slow breath. Then we tell it we'll leave. But first we need to explain that not all humans are hostile. Can you send that? Samantha nodded and began typing. As the message transmitted, Vera's response came quickly a warm. Golden glow filled the ship, accompanied by a soothing, For the first time since encountering the entity, the crew felt a glimmer of hope. But unknown to them, Quinn's betrayal had set events in motion that would test that fragile trust and perhaps doom them all. The golden glow faded slowly, leaving the crew of the Eclipse in a tense silence. Captain Alan Carter stood near the viewport, watching as Vera's massive form drifted lazily outside the ship. The entity seemed calmer now, its movements less erratic and more deliberate. It was responding to their efforts at communication, but Alan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a tightrope. One wrong move, one misinterpreted signal, and everything could fall apart. Samantha Lane sat at her station, her fingers hovering over the controls. She had been tasked with maintaining the fragile line of communication between the humans and Vera. Each message she sent was carefully crafted, simple, clear, and non-threatening. But even then, she wasn't sure if Vera truly understood. The entity's responses came in waves of light and sound, beautiful but cryptic. Was it trying to reassure them? Was it warning them? Sir David Ross called from the sensor. Station, I'm picking up something new. It's faint, but it's consistent. Alan turned sharply. What is it? It's coming from Vera, David replied. Some kind of energy signature. I think it might be sharing part of itself with us. Before anyone could respond, the lights on the bridge dimmed momentarily, and a soft hum filled the air. It wasn't unpleasant, in fact, it felt almost soothing, like the hum of a lullaby. Then, images began flashing across the main screen. They were blurry at first, but gradually sharpened into recognizable shapes. Swirling galaxies, distant stars, and strange creatures unlike anything the crew had ever seen. What are we looking at? Samantha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think it's showing us its memories, Alan said slowly, its history. The images shifted again, this time depicting Vera itself. The crew watched in awe as the entity revealed how it had once thrived in its home galaxy, acting as both protector and predator. It maintained balance by hunting invasive species that threatened weaker life forms, ensuring harmony among the ecosystems. But as time passed, those ecosystems began to collapse. Stars died, planets became barren, and Vera found itself alone, drifting through empty space for centuries. Then came the moment when humanity entered the picture. The screen showed flashes of Imperial ships appearing on the edge of Vera's territory. At first, Vera observed cautiously, unsure of their intentions. But when the fleet advanced aggressively, weapons powered and shields raised, Vera reacted instinctively. It saw them as invaders, a threat to its existence, and struck without hesitation. When the images faded, the bridge fell silent. Everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Vera wasn't evil, it was scared, confused and isolated. It had acted out of self-preservation, not malice. "We have to tell Earth," Alan said finally. "If they understand what Vera is, maybe they'll back off." Samantha nodded. "I'll send another transmission right away." Back on Earth, Dr. Laura Bennett received the latest update from the eclipse. As she reviewed the data, her heart sank. While the crew had made incredible progress in understanding Vera, the political situation on Earth was deteriorating rapidly. Senator Harold Klein, a staunch advocate for military action, had convinced the Senate to authorize a second fleet to engage Vera. Admiral Hayes supported the decision, arguing that diplomacy was too risky given the stakes. Laura rushed to the Senate chambers determined to intervene. When she arrived, the room was packed with officials, all shouting over each other. Klein stood at the center, his face red with anger as he slammed his fist on the podium. "This thing is a menace," he bellowed. "It wiped out an entire armada. We can't negotiate with it. We need to destroy it before it comes after us next." Laura pushed her way to the front, ignoring the murmurs of disapproval from the crowd. "Senator Klein, please. Listen, this isn't some mindless weapon. It's a living being, intelligent and capable of reason. It's attacked because it thought we were hostile." Klein sneered. "And you expect us to believe that? How do we know it won't turn on us the moment our backs are turned?" "Because it hasn't already," Laura shot back. "Captain Carter and his crew have established contact. They're communicating with it peacefully. We attack now, we'll undo everything they've accomplished and provoke it into retaliating." Admiral Hayes stepped forward, his expression grim. "Dr. Bennett, your theories are interesting, but we don't have the luxury of waiting. The public is terrified. People want answers and they want action. That fleet launches in 12 hours. Laura felt despair wash over her. 12 hours wouldn't be enough time to convince the Empire to stand down. Unless she could provide concrete proof that Vera posed no immediate threat. War was inevitable. Unbeknownst to the crew of the Eclipse, Lieutenant Robert Quinn's betrayal was about to come to light. The coordinates he had secretly transmitted reached Admiral Hayes within minutes. Though Hayes was hesitant to act prematurely, Klein seized the opportunity, demanding immediate deployment of the fleet. By the time the Eclipse received word of the incoming ships, it was too late to stop them. "Sir, we've got multiple signatures approaching fast," David reported, his voice trembling. "It's the fleet. They're armed and closing in." Alan's blood ran cold. "Did they receive our last transmission?" "They must have," Samantha replied. "But it didn't matter. Someone tipped them off." Alan clenched his fists. "Whoever did this has just signed our death warrants." As the fleet drew closer, Vera reacted instantly. The calm, curious presence that had dominated the past few hours vanished, replaced by something far more menacing. Its massive form darkened, pulsing with angry red hues. A low rumble echoed through the ship, growing louder with each passing second. "It knows," Alan whispered. "It thinks we betrayed it." "We didn't," Samantha cried. "We have to tell it the truth." "How?" Alan snapped. "They're already firing." Sure enough, the first salvos from the fleet streaked past the Eclipse, slamming into Vera's form. The entity recoiled, but only briefly. With terrifying speed, it retaliated, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the attacking ships. Explosions lit up the void, sending debris spiraling outward. The crew of the Eclipse watched in horror as dozens of vessels were obliterated in seconds. "Cease fire?" Alan shouted into the comms. "Stand down, you're making it worse." His pleas went unanswered. The fleet continued its assault, blinded by fear and vengeance. Vera, however, showed no mercy. Its counterattack was swift and devastating, reducing the once mighty armada to smoldering wreckage. Amid the chaos, Quinn realized the enormity of his mistake. He had believed destroying Vera was the only way to protect humanity. He saw the true cost of his actions. Without hesitation, he ran to the hangar bay, where a single shuttle remained docked. Grabbing a portable transmitter loaded with Dr. Bennett's data, he prepared for what might be his final mission. "Quinn, what are you doing?" Alan demanded as he entered the hangar. "I'm fixing this," Quinn replied, his voice steady. Despite the tears streaming down his face, "I started this mess, and I'm going to end it." Before Alan could stop him, Quinn launched the shuttle, heading straight for Vera, using the transmitter. He broadcast a looped message of peace, interspersed with recordings of Vera's own signals. It was a desperate gamble, but it worked. Sensing Quinn's sincerity, Vera paused its assault, focusing instead on the tiny craft hurtling toward it. Quinn knew he wouldn't survive. As the shuttle was enveloped by Vera's massive form, he closed his eyes, hoping his sacrifice would buy humanity a chance at redemption. On the Eclipse, the crew watched in stunned silence as Vera withdrew its forces. The battle was over, but the cost had been catastrophic. Alan turned to Samantha, his voice heavy with grief. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them what happened here, and tell them we still have a chance to make things right." Samantha nodded, tears in her eyes. For now, the fragile thread of trust between humanity and Vera remained intact. But whether it would hold depended on the choices yet to come. The silence on the Eclipse was deafening. The crew sat frozen in their seats, staring at the wreckage of the fleet scattered across space like broken toys. Vera's massive form loomed nearby, its edges glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. It wasn't attacking anymore, but it wasn't leaving either. The entity seemed to be watching, waiting for what? No one could say. Captain Alan Carter stood at the center of the bridge, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lieutenant Quinn's sacrifice had stopped Vera's rampage, but the damage was done. Dozens of ships were gone, along with thousands of lives. The weight of it pressed down on Alan's chest, making it hard to breathe. He had failed. Not just his crew, not just the fleet, but humanity itself. "Sir," Samantha Lane said softly, breaking the silence. "What do we do now?" Alan didn't answer right away. His mind raced, searching for a way forward. They couldn't fight. Varret was clear that any attempt to harm it would only provoke further destruction. But diplomacy felt impossible too. How could they rebuild trust after everything that had happened? "We keep talking," Alan said finally, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside him. "Quinn gave us a chance. Can't waste it." Samantha nodded and returned to her station, typing furiously as she prepared another message for Vera. This time the words were simple but heartfelt. "We are sorry. We did not mean to hurt you. Please forgive us." As the transmission went out, the crew held their breath. For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. Then, slowly, Vera began to change. Its glowing edges brightened, shifting from blue to a soft golden hue. A low hum filled the ship, resonant and soothing, almost like a sigh of relief. "It's calming down," David Ross observed, his eyes glued to the sensor readings. "Its energy levels are dropping. I think it understands." Alan let out a shaky breath. "Good. Now we need to make sure Earth understands too." Back on Earth, Dr. Duck. Laura Bennett watched the live feed from the Eclipse with tears in her eyes. She had seen every moment of the battle, the fleet's reckless charge, Vera's devastating retaliation, and Quinn's final act of redemption. It was heartbreaking, but also inspiring. Humanity had been given a second chance, and Laura was determined to make sure it wasn't wasted. She called an emergency meeting with Admiral Gregory Hayes and Senator Harold Klein. The room was tense, charged with anger and accusation. Klein paced back and forth, his face red with fury. "This is your fault," he shouted at Laura. "You convinced us to wait, to trust these scientists, and look what happened.
Thousands dead.
Because of your theories." Laura stood her ground, her voice steady despite the storm around her. "And how many more would have died if we hadn't tried? Vera isn't a weapon or a monster, it's a living being. It attacked because it felt threatened. If we keep treating it like an enemy, it will respond in kind." Hayes rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. "Doctor, I understand your point, but the public won't see it that way. They're scared. They want answers and they want justice." "Then give them the truth," Laura replied. "Show them the recordings. Let them see what really happened. If people understand that Vera acted out of fear, maybe they'll support peace instead of war." Hayes hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "All right, we'll release the footage. But if this blows up in our faces, The responsibility is yours. That broad aired within hours, reaching every corner of the Empire. Billions of people tuned in, watching as the events unfolded in stark detail. At first, reactions were mixed. Some viewers were outraged, calling for immediate retaliation against Vera. Others were horrified by the loss of life and demanded accountability from the Senate. When as the story continued, something shifted. When the feed showed Lieutenant Quinn sacrifice his small shuttle flying directly into Vera's massive form. Broadcasting a message of peace, the tone changed completely. Tears flowed freely as audiences realized the depth of his bravery. Social media exploded with tributes to Quinn, hailing him as a hero who had saved countless lives. Even Senator Klein found himself unable to argue against the overwhelming tide of public sympathy. Laura watched the response unfold with cautious optimism. For the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. The Empire wasn't ready to embrace Vera as a friend, but at least it was willing to listen. Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused during the battle. Systems were still unstable, and supplies were running low, but morale had improved slightly. The knowledge that Earth now understood their situation brought a glimmer of relief. Still, Alan knew they weren't out of danger yet. Vera remained outside the ship, its presence both awe-inspiring and intimidating. While it had stopped attacking, it hadn't left either. It was as though it was waiting for something or someone to prove themselves worthy of trust. "Samantha," Alan said one evening as they sat together in the dimly lit mess hall. "Do you think we'll ever truly understand Vera?" Samantha stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I don't know, sir. It's so different from anything we've ever encountered. But maybe that's the point. Maybe understanding isn't about finding similarities, it's about accepting differences." Alan smiled faintly. "That's easier said than done." "No," Samantha admitted, "but we have to try. If we don't, all of this, the battle, Quinn's sacrifice, it'll mean nothing." Over the next few days, the crew of the Eclipse focused on strengthening their connection with Vera. They sent messages constantly, sharing stories of human culture, history, and art. In return, Vera responded with bursts of color and sound, each sequence more intricate than the last. Slowly, a fragile bond began to form. One day, as Alan reviewed the latest exchange, he noticed something unusual. Among the swirling patterns was a new Elementa shape that resembled a human hand, reaching outward. It was crude, almost childlike, but unmistakable. "Samantha," Alan called, his voice trembling with excitement. "Come look at this." Samantha rushed over, her eyes widening as she saw the image. "It's trying to mimic us." Alan nodded. "It's learning. And maybe, just maybe, it wants to connect." On Earth, Laura received word of the breakthrough. She immediately contacted the Senate, urging them to take advantage of the opportunity. "This is our chance," she told them. "Vera's extending an olive branch. If we ignore it, we risk losing everything." To her surprise, the Senate agreed. A delegation was assembled, including scientists, diplomats, and even representatives from the military. Their mission was simple: meet with Vera and establish formal relations. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. As the delegation prepared to depart, Laura reflected on how far they'd come. From panic and mistrust to tentative understanding, the journey had been long and painful. But it was also proof that humanity could rise above its fears if it chose to. Back aboard the Eclipse, Alan gazed out at Vera's glowing form. The entity pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, as if breathing in sync with the stars. For the first time in days, Alan felt a spark of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as enemies, but as explorers navigating the vast unknown. "Let's get to work," he said to his crew, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We've got a lot to learn, and even more to teach." The delegation from Earth arrived aboard a sleek, newly commissioned starship called the Unity. It was smaller than the Eclipse, but equipped with advanced communication systems and scientific instruments designed specifically for interacting with Vera. Captain Alan Carter greeted the newcomers as they docked, his expression a mix of relief and apprehension. He had spent days preparing for this moment, but nothing could fully ease the tension of bringing so many people into such a delicate situation. Leading the delegation was Ambassador Rachel Meyer, a seasoned diplomat known for her calm demeanor and sharp intellect. She stepped off the shuttle, flanked by Dr. Laura Bennett and a team of experts, each carrying equipment and data pads filled with research. Rachel extended her hand to Alan, who shook it firmly. "Captain Carter," she said, her voice warm but measured. "Thank you for holding the line out here. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." Alan nodded. "You're welcome, Ambassador. Just remember, Vera isn't like anything we've dealt with before. Patience is key." Rachel smiled faintly. "Understood. Let's get started." The first meeting between the delegation and Vera took place in the observation lounge of the Eclipse. The massive entity hovered outside the viewport, its form shifting subtly as if aware of the gathering inside. Samantha Lane stood at the communications console, ready to translate any signals Vera sent. Laura set up her equipment nearby, eager. To document every interaction, Ambassador Meyer began by addressing Vera directly. Her words broadcast through the ship's external speakers. "We come in peace. We are here to learn about Yuan, to share our story." For a moment, there was no response. Then slowly, Vera's edges brightened, pulsing with soft golden light. A series of rhythmic sounds echoed through the room, resonating like a heartbeat. Samantha listened intently, adjusting the frequencies on her console. "It's responding," she said, excitement coloring her voice. "It's acknowledging us." Encouraged, Rachel continued. "Near, that was not our intention. We want to understand you, to find a way for us to live together without fear." As the message transmitted, Vera's glow intensified, and patterns of color began to swirl across its surface. Laura leaned forward, studying the display on her tablet. "Look at this," she whispered, "showing us something, a map, maybe." David Ross joined her, analyzing the data. It's pointing to a specific location. It could be where. "It comes from originally." Rachel turned to Alan. "Do you think it wants us to go there?" "It's possible," Alan replied. "But we need to tread carefully. If we misunderstand, it could see it as another threat." Despite the risks, the decision was made to follow Vera's guidance. The Unity would accompany the Eclipse to the coordinates provided, while maintaining constant communication with Earth. As the two ships prepared to depart, Vera moved ahead of them, acting as both guide and protector. The journey lasted several days, during which the crew worked tirelessly to deepen their understanding of Vera. Each interaction revealed new layers of complexity. The entity wasn't just intelligent, it was empathetic, capable of sensing emotions and responding accordingly. When the crew felt anxious, Vrya emitted calming waves of light. When they celebrated small victories, it mirrored their joy with bursts of vibrant colors. Laura spent hours analyzing the recordings, piecing together what she believed was Vera's language. She theorized that the entity communicated not only through sound and light, but also through vibrations that resonated with human emotions. By matching these vibrations to specific feelings, she hoped to create a rudimentary dictionary. "This is groundbreaking," she told Rachel one evening as they reviewed the data. "We can decode even part of Vera's communication system. It could revolutionize how we interact with alien species." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Assuming humanity is willing to adapt, not everyone is going to embrace this kind of change." "That's why we have to make it clear," Laura replied. "This isn't just about Vera, it's about learning to coexist with the unknown." When the fleet finally reached the destination, they found themselves in a region of space unlike anything they'd ever seen. Stars clustered densely overhead, casting an ethereal glow over a vast nebula swirling with hues of purple, blue, and green. At the center of it all was a planet, shrouded in mist, but radiating energy. "That must be it," David said, pointing to the readings on his screen. "Vera's home." As the ships approached, Vera slowed, hovering protectively around the planet. Its movements became more deliberate, almost reverent. The crew watched in awe as the mist parted slightly, revealing glimpses of a world teeming with life. Towering crystalline structures jutted from the surface, shimmering with iridescent light. Strange creatures drifted lazily through the air, their forms translucent and otherworldly. "It's beautiful," Samantha murmured, her eyes wide with wonder. "And dangerous," Alan added, his tone cautious. "We don't know what's down there or how Vera will react if we try to land." Rachel considered the dilemma. "We need to show respect. If Vera brought us here, it's because it trusts us at least enough to share this place. But we should proceed carefully." After much debate, a small landing party was assembled, consisting of Rachel, Laura, Alan, and 2 security officers. They boarded a shuttle and descended toward the planet, guided by Vera's gentle pulses of light. As they touched down, the air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath them seemed to hum softly. Stepping out onto the surface, the team was immediately struck by the sheer alienness of the environment. The crystals emitted soft chimes as they moved, and the creatures floating nearby appeared curious rather than hostile. One of them, a large jellyfish-like being, drifted closer, lower, its body glowing faintly. Laura extended her hand cautiously, mimicking the gesture Vera had shown them earlier. To everyone's surprise, the creature responded, brushing against her fingers with a tenderness that belied its size. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she realized the significance of the moment. This was proof that coexistence was possible, not just with Vera, but with all forms of life. Back on the ships, the rest of the crew monitored the situation anxiously. Vera remained close, its presence reassuring. When the landing party returned hours later, they brought with them samples, recordings, and a renewed sense of purpose. "We've learned so much," Rachel reported to the Senate via a secure transmission. "This planet is a sanctuary, a place where life thrives in harmony. Vera protects it, just as it once protected its galaxy." The Senate listened intently, their skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. For the first time, humanity saw Vera not as a threat, but as a guardian. Plans were made to establish a permanent research outpost in the area, staffed by scientists dedicated to studying the planet and fostering peaceful relations with VEYRA. As the mission drew to a close, Alan stood on the bridge of the eclipse, watching Vera drift gracefully among the stars. The entity pulsed once, a final farewell, before disappearing into the depths of space. Though it was gone, its impact lingered, a reminder that even in the face of fear and misunderstanding, connection was always possible. "Where do you think it's going?" Samantha asked quietly. Alan smiled. "Somewhere it feels safe, somewhere it belongs." "And us?" she pressed. "What happens now?" "Keep moving forward," Alan replied. "One step at a time." The days following the encounter with Vera passed quickly for the crew of the Eclipse. The sense of awe and wonder lingered, but so did a quiet determination. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a glimpse of what could be achieved. When fear gave way to understanding, ensuring that every detail of their experience was documented, he knew the story of Vera would shape humanity's future, whether people were ready for it or not. Samantha Lane worked tirelessly alongside him, playing the recordings of Vera's signals over and over again. She had grown attached to the entity in her own way, finding comfort in its rhythmic hums and glowing patterns. Though she understood that Vera had left for good, part of her hoped it might return someday. For now, she focused on translating its messages, piecing together fragments of its language into something humans could use. Dr. Laura Bennett, meanwhile, had returned to Earth with the delegation, carrying with her a wealth of data collected. During their journey, her lab became a hub of activity as scientists from around the globe gathered to analyze the samples and observations brought back from Vera's home planet. The crystalline structures, in particular, fascinated them. They emitted frequencies unlike anything seen before, suggesting advanced properties that could revolutionize technology. They could unlock their secrets. Laura also took on the role of an ambassador of sorts, speaking at conferences and addressing the public about the importance of peaceful coexistence with alien life forms. "Vera taught us that intelligence doesn't always look like ours," she said during one televised interview. "It's not about dominance or control, it's about respect. We can learn to listen instead of assuming we'll find that. The universe has much more to offer than we ever imagined." Her words resonated deeply, sparking debates across the empire. Others remained skeptical, warning against placing too much trust in beings they didn't fully understand. But even among the skeptics, there was a growing acknowledgement that the old ways conquest and colonization were no longer sustainable. Back on the Eclipse, the crew prepared for their return to Earth. Repairs had been completed, supplies replenished, and morale was higher than it had been in weeks. Yet there was a bittersweetness to their departure. This mission had changed them all in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. They had faced death, betrayal, and redemption and come out stronger for it. On their final night aboard the ship, Alan called the crew together in the mess hall. It was a rare moment of downtime, and he wanted to mark it properly. As everyone settled into their seats, he stood at the front of the room, holding up a glass of water. "I want to thank each and every one of you," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "What we've done here, what we've accomplished, it's bigger than any of us. We faced something none of us could have imagined, and we didn't just survive. We grew, we learned. And because of that, I believe we've taken the first real step toward becoming better than we were." The room erupted in applause, cheers mingling with laughter and tears. Samantha raised her own glass, grinning broadly. "To Vera, she," said Anne to Quinn. "Without them, none of this would have happened." "To Quinn," the others echoed. Lifting their glasses in solemn remembrance, Quinn's sacrifice weighed heavily on all of them. But it also served as a reminder of the cost of fear and misunderstanding. His actions had saved countless lives, proving that even in moments of doubt, courage could shine through. Alan made a mental note to ensure Quinn's name was honored officially once they returned to Earth. When the Eclipse finally docked at the orbital station above Earth, the crew was greeted as heroes. Reporters swarmed the landing bay, cameras flashing as Alan and his team disembarked. Ambassador Rachel Meyer joined them, offering warm congratulations and thanking them publicly for their bravery. The Senate held a special session to commend the crew, presenting medals to those who had played key roles in the mission. But amidst the celebrations, Alan felt a pang of unease. He knew the real work was only beginning. Humanity had been given a second chance, but whether it would seize it depended on choices yet to be made. Would the lessons of Vera endure, or would fear and greed once again take hold? His concerns were shared by Laura, who continued to push for policy changes within the Galactic Empire. With the support of influential figures like Rachel Meyer, she proposed the creation of a new department dedicated to interspecies relations. Its purpose would be to study and engage with alien civilizations peacefully, prioritizing dialogue over conflict. After months of debate, the proposal was approved, marking a significant shift in how the Empire conducted itself beyond its borders. As time went on, the memory of Vera began to fade from the public consciousness, replaced by newer headlines and challenges. But for those who had been part of the mission, it remained vivid. Samantha decided to pursue a career in xenolinguistics. Inspired by her interactions with Vera, she dreamed of one day encountering another, intelligent species, and bridging the gap between humanity and the unknown. David Ross stayed with the fleet, rising through the ranks to become a lead scientist aboard a research vessel. His expertise in decoding alien signals made him invaluable, and he often found himself thinking back to the patterns Vera had shown them. "It's like music," he told colleagues. "If you listen closely enough, you can hear the melody." Alan, too, carried the experience with him wherever he went. Though he eventually retired from active duty, he wrote extensively about his time aboard the Eclipse, sharing his insights with future generations of explorers. In his memoirs, he reflected on the fragility of life, not just human life, but all life, and the responsibility that came with wielding power. Years later, humanity's relationship with the stars had evolved. Exploratory missions ventured farther than ever before, guided by principles of mutual respect and cooperation. The outpost near Vera's home planet thrived, becoming a symbol of hope and collaboration. Scientists from dozens of worlds worked side by side, uncovering mysteries that deepened humanity's understanding of the universe. And though Vera never returned, its legacy endured. On clear nights, when Alan gazed up at the stars from his porch, He sometimes imagined seeing its glowing form drifting among the constellations. He smiled, knowing that somewhere out there it watched over the fragile balance it had sworn to protect. In the end, the story of Vera wasn't just about survival. It was about possibility. The idea that even in the vast, unknowable expanse of space, connection was always within reach. All it took was the willingness to listen.